On today's episode, could big defenseman Anton Silayev be a good fit on the Blackhawks blue line? I'll answer that, and we'll get into Jason Dickinson's report card.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Just a quick reminder to everyone watching on YouTube right now to hit that like button. Comment down below as well as to your thoughts on big defenseman Anton Silayev, whether you think the Blackhawks should be interested in him with the second overall pick, and also the grade that you would give Jason Dickinson for his performance this season. Make sure you're subscribed to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel as well, as I'll be going through a lot more NHL draft profiles leading up to this year's draft. I also still got a couple more report cards to go through, and coming up soon, I'm going to be dishing out my Chicago Blackhawks top 10 prospect list. So a lot of fun Blackhawks conversations going to be had on the channel here this summer. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of that good stuff. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. I know it's been a couple of days since I posted an episode, and obviously I'm not in my normal studio. I'm currently down in Fort Worth, Texas, covering a golf tournament here this week. Yesterday was a little bit of a crazy travel day, kind of getting everything situated before departing. So I do apologize for not having episodes come out on Monday and Tuesday, but good to be back here on the show today. Gonna try to get something out on Saturday as well. So I still come out with 4 episodes because, as I mentioned off the top, still a boatload of NHL draft profiles I got to get into here, as we're now down to just over a month away from the 2024 NHL draft, where we know the Blackhawks have the second overall pick. Again, go and jump down below in the comment section as to your thoughts on big 6'7" defenseman Anton Silayev, who I'm going to be covering here today. A very polarizing player in this year's draft, mostly because he's a 6'7", 210-pound left-handed defenseman who turned 18 back in April, and already has a full season of KHL action under his belt. And it wasn't like, he just played a couple of games. He sprinkled in a few games worth of action there in the KHL. No, he was a full-time KHL player as a 17-year-old and played a pretty meaningful role for his team, took on very big minutes, as I mentioned, as a 17-year-old. So very impressive stuff. He also tallied 11 points in 63 KHL games this year, 3 goals and 8 assists. That's good for the most points by a U18 defender in KHL history. And he's very likely going to break the U19 record, as well as he is under contract over in Russia for 2 more years. So that is something you got to keep in mind. Ivan Demidov sounds very likely that he's going to come over to North America once his KHL contract concludes at the end of next year, whereas Anton Silayev, it does seem likely that he's going to come over after those 2 years, but a little bit bigger of a question mark, in my opinion, compared to Ivan Demidov. But as I've referenced, I don't think it's much of a problem in today's day and age as it was 10 to 15 years ago. I understand people are concerned about Russian prospects never coming over. I just think in today's day and age, these kids want to play the best possible hockey out there, and that's in the NHL. So I'd be very shocked if someone with a high profile like Anton Silayev never came over to North America. But Ivan Demidov, Anton Silayev is one of the 4 or 5 most intriguing defensemen in this year's draft class. The other 3 are kind of undersized in Zane Parekh, Zeev Buium, and Carter Yakimchuk. But Artem Levshinov and Anton Silayev are the 2 defenders with some really good size in this year's draft class. Levshinov, obviously being the righty, I've already broken his draft profile down, along with Ivan Demidov, Caden Lindstrom, Cole Iserman, and most recently Zane Parekh. Make sure to go and check out those shows if you haven't done so already and you want to hear more about those prospects. You can easily find them on the NHL Draft Profile playlist on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. Make sure to hit that subscribe button while you're there. But yes, Artem Levshinov is the big righty in this year's draft class. Anton Silayev is the big lefty. And I know the Blackhawks aren't likely to take a left-handed defenseman in the first round of this year's draft, but I do still think it's important to break down a player who has upside, especially like Anton Silayev. It also, I think, gives us a little bit better of an idea as to where all of these defensemen sit. And then when I do finally unveil my mock draft before the 2024 NHL draft class goes down, it's nice to kind of have an understanding about all of these players. And I want to make sure that you all are aware about what all of these young kids bring to the table. So even though it is unlikely the Blackhawks take a left-handed defenseman, I still am going to go over a player like Anton Silayev and a boatload of other guys that maybe aren't likely options for the Blackhawks, but just for information purposes, I think it makes sense. But Anton Silayev is a very curious case, not only because of his size, but because before this year, he wasn't really on anyone's radar as being a high first round pick, especially. And now he's kind of crept himself into that top 10. And that's because he had such an explosive year out in the KHL and got off to a really hot start. Out of those 8 points that he tallied this year, 6 came in the first 6 games of the season. And he was coming off a year in the MHL where he didn't really catch any eyes, right? He didn't have the best sort of junior campaign there. And then, really burst onto the scene because of all the success that he found, particularly early on in the season in the KHL. But took on a very meaningful role for Torpedo Novgorod over in the KHL, was playing a top 4 role. And because of all the success he found, has inserted himself into the top 10 conversation and possibly even in the top 5, depending on who you're talking to. And because of all the intrigue surrounding him, I think it's only fair to say that Anton Silayev has been fairly deemed as the biggest wild card in this year's draft. Could possibly go in the top 5, could possibly fall out of the top 10, depending on who you're asking. But as far as the rankings go, he's kind of all over the place. Ranked 9th by Elite Prospects, 2nd by Bob McKenzie, but that is an old ranking. 12th by Craig Button, 13th by Tony Ferrari, so outside of the top 10 by those two guys' measures. 4th by McKean's Hockey, 4th by Chris Peters, 5th by Daily Faceoff, 4th by Sportsnet, and 12th by Dobber Prospect. So a little bit all over the place is Anton Silayev. As far as his strengths and weaknesses, as far as the strengths go, 2 big things, size and skating. Obviously, has a remarkable frame for being 18 years of age. You don't see very many 6'7" defensemen that young, and he already kind of plays like a grown man. He was thrown into a grown man's league, and he kind of shined in playing in that style. He's already a very physical defenseman with his size, and he understands how to use it and takes advantage of his size to separate players off of the puck along the boards and the defensive side of things. He's also pretty physical in front of his own goaltender and can knock guys out of the blue crease so they're not able to corral rebounds. And he's also able to kind of shield the puck away from defenders and forecheckers whenever he's carrying the puck out of harm's way in the defensive zone or lugging it up ice. So a very physical defenseman at a young age. Plus, the skating upside is where everyone is really licking their chops about Anton Silayev, because truthfully, he moves as well as anyone at that size that I've ever seen at 17, 18 years of age. It's incredible how he's able to move. There's clear flow in his skating. I think the mechanics are really, really good. He's got good edge work. He maybe doesn't have that top level straight away, like breakaway style speed. I know defenders don't get many breakaways, but he's not like a high octane skater, but he's just very comfortable and it flows very nicely. And like I said, I've never really seen a 17, 18-year-old kid at his size possess those type of skating mechanics and that type of skating upside. So I think that's why people are so high on Anton Silayev, right? Because you see 6'7", you see 210 pounds, and he already moves like he's capable of playing in the NHL, and his wheels didn't hinder him whatsoever in the KHL this past year. So really impressive makeup there in terms of the size and skating ability. I think those are undoubtedly Anton Silayev's 2 biggest strengths. I think, his puck carrying is okay. It's not really like he's a dominant puck carrier and someone who's going to be playing in transition, carrying the puck at all times. But like I said, he just looks very comfortable out there. There aren't any very big flaws that you would expect to see with a guy who's 6'7" and is still kind of figuring it out in terms of his movement. So that kind of combo that he has, yeah, it leads to undeniable upside. And he does also have a pretty good first pass and reads things pretty well in the offensive zone. I don't know if he's like a true offensive-minded defenseman, but there's a lot of runway there because of what he's able to do with his skating ability. As far as the weaknesses go, there's a couple things here as well. First and foremost, what I notice is for being a big boy, 6'7", 210 pounds, doesn't really have the most powerful shot. I think that's something that he certainly has to continue developing, as well as just his offensive profile overall. Like I said, I don't think he's ever going to be like a true offensive-minded defenseman. He doesn't have that one particular offensive attribute that I think is really going to flourish at the next level other than his skating ability. So I do kind of have some concerns as to whether or not he's going to provide enough offensively for someone who's going to go in the top 5. And I've seen a lot of Victor Hedman comparisons thrown out there about Anton Silayev. I honestly just don't see it. I'll admit there's a lot of runway there, but I don't think he's just as offensive minded, even though he is the highest scoring U18 defenseman in KHL history. I don't think he has that natural offensive minded game like a Victor Hedman does. I don't ever expect him to dominate games offensively like Victor Hedman does, or a couple of years ago when he was really at the peak of his game, the way that he was able to take over. I just don't necessarily see Anton Silayev translating in that matter. So there are just some consistency issues as well as far as the decision making, forces some turnovers, puts himself in some bad spots from time to time. His gap control isn't always perfect, but those are things, that aren't unusual to say about a 17, 18-year-old kid who's already playing professional hockey, already playing a men's game, but he is definitely very raw. He's a work in progress. I think, even if he does come over to North America in a couple of years, once that contract does expire, I don't know necessarily if he'll mesh perfectly into the North American style and playing on smaller ice. I don't think it's as easy as a transition as some people think it's going to be, because there are just a lot of things that Anton Silayev needs to keep developing over the years. And because of that, I just see him as a little bit of a gamble in this year's draft. So as far as a projection, I really do think he's a boom or bust type of player, because really, one great season has kind of put him on the map. Like I said, didn't have a very notable season in the MHL the year prior, and most of his offensive production came in the first 6 games, and that's really what got him on the radar. Now, he went on to have a phenomenal season defensively, but again, I just don't know if I see the true offensive upside for a defenseman who's slated to go inside of the top 5. But it's undeniable what he possesses. The size, the skating ability, it's like, comparing him to Alex Vlasic when he was coming out in his draft year, Anton Silayev's the better skater. He's just as big, and he has a better puck game. So there absolutely are a lot of reasons to be high on this kid, and you can see why some people have him in their top 5. And I think because of all the runway he has, I'd be really shocked if someone didn't take a chance on him and picks in between numbers 3 through 5. I think he has the highest defensive ceiling of anyone in this draft, the way that he's already able to play a man's game and is comfortable defending at 17, 18 years old. I think ceiling-wise, he has the highest defensive ability in this year's draft, but he also doesn't quite have the floor that someone like Artem Levshinov has. And I also think he kind of has a 1B ceiling, because I don't think he's got the offensive skill set to ever be a 1A defender on the top pairing. I feel like he's going to be the complementary defensive piece on a top pairing if he does ever hit his ceiling. And then as far as a long-term fit with the Blackhawks, yeah, it would absolutely give the Blackhawks a massive decor back there with Alex Vlasic, Ethan Del Mastro, Seth Jones, Connor Murphy are 2 big guys who are still under contract. Sam Rinzel's 6'4". Louis Crevier is obviously 6'7" as well. Tage Harding is 6'7". Kevin Korchinski, even though he's thin, he's, 6'1", 6'2". And he does, Anton Silayev does fit the mold of defenseman that I think Kyle Davidson seems to have, likes to have in the organization. And Adding Anton Silayev would give the Blackhawks, an incredible left side with Vlasic, Del Mastro, and him, along with Wyatt Kaiser. The concerns that I have are it was just one season out of Anton Silayev where he really shined and jumped onto the scene. I really wish we could see him play internationally to get some more exposure to him. But I just think the Blackhawks have other needs that they need to address in the first round, whether that's another forward up high with Connor Bedard. Right-handed defenseman, I think, is certainly what they need more in terms of lefty versus righty. And also just considering that they already have Vlasic, Del Mastro, Korchinski, and Kaiser on the left-hand side, I think it's pretty unlikely that Anton Silayev winds up going to the Blackhawks at number 2, or they even consider trading up for him unless something crazy were to happen and he's their best player on the board by a wide margin. And the reason that the Blackhawks, I think, aren't going to be intrigued by Anton Silayev is not because of his skill. It's not because of his game. And listen, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they do. Maybe they are one of those people that has him slated to go here in the top 3 because of his size and skill. I just don't see him as a natural fit given what the Blackhawks have in the organization now. And I just don't think that they can pass on Ivan Demidov's skill set with the second overall pick. So because of those reasons, I don't think Anton Silayev is very likely to wind up with the Chicago Blackhawks, but there clearly is a lot to like there. There's a lot of runway for a player of his size with his skating ability. And it's going to be very interesting to see where he winds up getting selected, how early he winds up going, and also how things fare for him in the next couple of years in the KHL before I eventually expect him to make the jump over to North America following the 2025-2026 season. All right, that is going to take care of Anton Silayev's 2024 NHL Draft Profile. Coming up in just a moment here, Hawks fans, I still have to get into veteran forward Jason Dickinson's report card. But first, I got to talk to you all about Policygenius. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million worth of coverage. And some options even offer same-day approval and also help avoid unnecessary medical exams. And Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace that helps you save both time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting right here today. Go and talk to a team of award-winning agents who will walk you through the process step by step along your side, comparing quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to get you the best and lowest price. And Policygenius is a trustworthy marketplace with thousands of 5-star reviews on both Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. So go and check life insurance off of your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head on over to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or simply go and click the link down in the description to get free life insurance quotes today and see how much you could be saving. Again, that's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. Segment 2, it's time to get into yet another report card here on the show. I've already gone over Blackhawks notables such as Connor Bedard, Philip Kurashev, Seth Jones, Nick Foligno, Alex Vlasic, Kevin Korchinski. If you missed any of those and there's a player you want to hear about, you want to hear what grade I gave them for their performance this season, make sure to go and check that out on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. I also have a 2023-2024 report card playlist, so you can easily find all of the episodes there, and everything is time-coded down in the description as well, so you can easily make the jump through all of those videos. Today, though, next man up that I'm going to be dishing out a grade to for their performance this season is 28-year-old forward Jason Dickinson, who spent his second year as a member of the Chicago Blackhawks after being acquired along with a second-round pick in exchange for Riley Stillman from the Vancouver Canucks prior to the 2022-2023 season. Even after Dickinson's first year with the Blackhawks, that was shaping up to be a pretty good deal for Hawks GM Kyle Davidson, but now it is looking like an absolute grand slam home run based on the type of the season that Jason Dickinson had, which was also really nice to see as a guy who was selected late in the first round back in 2013, got traded out of Dallas after a couple of good seasons spent there, never really found his footing or found his spot in the Vancouver Canucks organization after signing a pretty noteworthy free agent ticket there. He gets kind of shelled off by Vancouver because of his cap situation, because of the price tag associated with him. They sell him for pennies on the dollar to the Chicago Blackhawks. And in his second season with the team, really found his stride and flourished for the first time at the NHL level, and also got rewarded for all of his production in the great season that he had with a 2-year contract extension. But as far as the numbers for Jason Dickinson, man, it's fun to dive into these because it's just a reminder of how good he was this year. Played in all 82 games for the Blackhawks, which was the only player on this team to do that. Obviously led the team with those 82 games played, and his production in those 82 games was phenomenal. 22 goals, ties the Blackhawks team lead the season along with Connor Bedard. Obviously a huge uptick for him in that category, as his previous career high was 9. He had tied that in his first season with the Blackhawks, but absolutely knocked his previous high out of the water with 22 tallies this year, chipped in for 13 assists as well, which was actually down from the 21 that he tallied in 78 games the year prior, but all in all, still netted a career high 35 points. Best of his NHL career by 5 points, and that was also good for fourth on the Blackhawks behind only Connor Bedard, Philip Kurashev, and Nick Foligno. Perhaps the most impressive stat, though, for Jason Dickinson is that in 82 games on this dreadful Chicago Blackhawks team, he had a +4 plus-minus rating. And I know I'm someone who comes on the show and talks about how plus-minus, it's not a fair stat to grade someone as the end-all, be-all for them. It's kind of an outdated stat, if you will, in today's NHL. I know this might be a little hypocritical of me, but for Jason Dickinson to be playing in the role that he was on, a defensive-minded role, going up against the opposition's top line night in and night out on one of the worst teams in all of hockey, the worst offensive team in all of hockey, a Blackhawks team that faced a ton of shots, gave up a ton of goals basically on a nightly basis. He was a team high +4. Man, that is rather impressive. And I think also kind of encapsulates how good of a defensive player and a two-way player Jason Dickinson became for the Blackhawks this season. It wasn't a team high +4. Joey Anderson +5 had the team high, but he only played in 55 games this year, and those were the only two positive players that the Chicago Blackhawks had. Another impressive statistic here for Dickinson: out of his 22 goals, it's not like he was a power play merchant or anything. He only scored 2 of them on the power play. 20 even strength goals out of Jason Dickinson. That led the Blackhawks this year. Also shot 17.5%, which, I think it's going to be very hard for him to repeat that number. Very nice to see him have offensive success, especially if the playmaking numbers, the assists were a little bit down. Certainly made up for it in terms of the puck luck that he had this year. Also chipped in for a career high 126 shots on net. So, hey, Jason, you shoot the puck more, you get some good puck luck. Hopefully that'll keep him aggressive going into next season as well. Also had a career high 16 minutes and 34 seconds of average time on ice. Second to third line center for the Blackhawks, and Luke Richardson, all season long. He also won 50% of his faceoffs, and it's the first time in his 8-year career that he's been over the 50% plateau. Chipped in for 73 blocks, also tallied a career high 143 hits. That was good for third on the Blackhawks. 54 takeaways to 35 giveaways. The analytics don't really jump out at you with a 43.4 Corsi for percentage, but considering the defensive-minded role, I'm not surprised to see that number. And he was also only on the ice for 56 goals for. Pretty solid number for a defensive-minded forward. A 73 against that even strength. Not all that bad, with an 89.3 on-ice save percentage. Breaking down the good and the bad for Jason Dickinson this year, lots of good produced offensively, obviously, like we've never seen from him before. Became a certified goal scorer and really helped out the struggling Blackhawks offense early on in the season when no one was able to score goals. Taylor Hall got hurt. Andreas Athanasiou was down. Connor Bedard was still finding his footing as a first-year pro. Seth Jones got off to a cold start. Philip Kurashev was a little bit banged up early. Jason Dickinson was really the one who came in and picked up the production when this Blackhawks offense was struggling at the beginning of the year. So offensively, he really shined, but defensively really thrived in that role as well. As I mentioned, a guy who faced off with the opposing team's top line kind of night in and night out, and clearly got trusted by Luke Richardson and the rest of the staff only more and more and more as the season went on. And to see Dickinson chip in the special teams department too was incredible. Like scoring even strength goals, producing offensively like we've never seen him before. as good defensively as we've ever seen him. Chipped in for 2 power play goals, was a big part of the penalty kill as well. Someone who willingly blocked shots, stepped up into the faceoff dot and won a lot of faceoffs this year. Chipped in for the most hits he's ever had in his career. Like basically anything the Blackhawks asked out of Jason Dickinson, he did this year, right? So a lot of respect for him. As I mentioned earlier, well deserving of that 2-year contract extension. And also stepped up in the leadership role as well, was wearing the A lot this season when Connor Murphy was out of the lineup. And a lot of guys talked about how Dickey was just kind of taking on that veteran leadership. So from all areas, Jason Dickinson really knocked it out of the park this year. As far as the bad, it's really hard for me to find much to say here. I would say that he kind of cooled off offensively in the second half. The goal scoring wasn't as prevalent down the stretch as it was early, but it was also going to be very hard for him to stay on that pace, and can never be mad about him setting a career high in goals by 13. And yeah, maybe the playmaking wasn't as good as it was the year prior, but the trade-off for that was him potting 22 goals, tying the team lead. I'd take it every year. So no complaints out of me on Jason Dickinson's season. He was excellent. I think I absolutely have to give him an A for his performance this season. This one kind of seems like a no-doubter to me. Wasn't as much of a runaway in terms of the fan voting as I was expecting. By the way, make sure to go and follow Talkin' Hockey on X so that you can share your vote as to what grade all of these players deserve. If you don't already, if you missed out on this poll, make sure to go and comment your grade for Dickinson's season down in the comment section. Only 57% of the voters gave him an A, 39% said B. I really don't know how you don't give him an A. Only 4% said C, though, 0% D/F. So to me, it's a pretty big no-brainer, but go and let me know what grade you would give Jason Dickinson for the smashing success that he found in his second campaign as a member of the Chicago Blackhawks. All right. That wraps up Jason Dickinson's 2023-2024 report card. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, I still have to get into my predictions ahead of the NHL Conference Finals. But first, I got to talk to you all real quick about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the championship trophy, and it's also what helps keep your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. Plus, with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or else you'll get your money back. So go and turn your car into the MVP and to bring home that championship trophy by checking out ebaymotors.com. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Again, that's ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only and exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S.-based customers. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, just a reminder to hit that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. If you're someone, even if you regularly tune into the audio podcast version of the show, please make sure to go and hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. It won't cost you anything. 100% free and really does help me out in growing the show. Excuse me while I take a sip of water real fast. I also got to remind you guys to go and check out the new Locked On Sports Today, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So make sure to go and check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, segment 3. We're now down to only 4 teams remaining in the 2024 Stanley Cup Playoffs. Those teams are the Dallas Stars, the Edmonton Oilers, the Florida Panthers, and the New York Rangers, as another excellent round of postseason hockey just wrapped up on Monday night. A tremendous Game 7 between the Edmonton Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks, even though that was the only one of the 4 series in the quarterfinals that, or in the second round, whatever you want to call it, that reached Game 7. All of these series, it felt like, per usual in the Stanley Cup playoffs, right? They were all tight-knit, closely contested, came down to the wire, and had a lot of dramatic flair involved in all of them. So going to quickly recap what went down in these series, as well as share my picks and predictions for the NHL conference finals. Also take a look back at my predictions from the second round to see how those went. Spoiler alert, did not go as good as they did in the first round. I crushed it in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. All 8 of the series winners I predicted correctly. That did not translate over to the second round, though, Blackhawks fans, is while I was correct about the Dallas Stars taking down the Colorado Avalanche and the Edmonton Oilers taking out the Vancouver Canucks, I had Carolina buzzsawing through the New York Rangers. That did not happen, and I also had the Boston Bruins taking down the Florida Panthers and going all the way to the Stanley Cup. Obviously, that is no longer in the cards as well, but all of these series were really great. Starting with the Dallas Stars Colorado Avalanche series, I really thought this one was going to go 7 games, but impressed with my Stanley Cup champion Dallas Stars getting the job done in 6 games. 3 of their 4 wins in this series impressively came in Colorado. The Avs just not able to do enough on home ice, particularly in Game 6, backs against the wall. Could have forced 7 back in Dallas. The game winds up going into double overtime. I was wiping my eyes on Friday night, hoping that this game was going to end at any moment. Matt Duchene finally, the OT, double OT hero, if you will, to get the Stars onto the second round. Just kind of seemed like the Avs ran out of gas, and I think Valeri Nichushkin being knocked out of the playoffs kind of took the wind out of their sails there. So Dallas Stars advanced big time there. I had Dallas in 7 games. They get the job done in 6. No harm, no foul there. Then the next series in the West, the Edmonton Oilers taking on the Vancouver Canucks. As I mentioned, went 7 games. And speaking of running out of gas, pretty clear that the Vancouver Canucks did that in this series as well. Not a very good effort in the first 45, 50 minutes of Game 7 to fall behind 3-0. Poor Artur Silavey did literally everything in his power to keep his team alive, but too little, too late for the Canucks. They wind up falling 3-2 in Game 7. And I think Brock Besser's injury ahead of Game 7 really didn't do the Canucks any favors there. I predicted that Edmonton would win this series in 5 games, a little bit closer than I would have liked. The Oilers still getting the job done in 7, though, advancing on to the conference finals against Dallas. And then out east, 0-2 in my second round predictions. I had Boston defeating Florida in 6 games. That looked pretty good after the way Boston was able to manhandle them and get that victory in Game 1. But Florida really responded well. They are an absolute runaway freight train at this point in time. Matt Tkachuk, Sam Bennett, what Sergei Bobrovsky is doing in that is rather impressive as well. I think the New York Rangers are going to have their absolute hands full in this series against the New York Rangers, who I thought were really going to struggle against the Carolina Hurricanes. I really liked what Carolina did at the deadline. I thought that was at least going to get them to the conference final, but they fell behind 3-0 in this series. Did get some momentum back on their side, though, as they managed to win games 4 and 5, held an advantage going into the third period in Game 6. Looked like they were going to force Game 7 until Chris Kreider comes up absolutely huge with the natural hat trick in Game 6 to steal that one for the Rangers and to advance them onto the conference finals against the Boston Bruins. So there we have it. The 4 teams left in the Stanley Cup playoffs. As far as what I think is going to happen out west, I'm sticking to my guns. I'm staying with the Dallas Stars. I think they get the job done over the Oilers in 6 games. And then the Florida Panthers, they're riding high right now. They can play physical. They can score a ton of goals. They got big body defensemen. Seeing what Gustav Forsling has turned into for them is just a real thorn in the side. I'll tell you what, a heck of a player on the blue line for them, the game winner to help them get into the conference finals. I think Florida, and this is nothing against New York, but they've had a lot of time off. They haven't faced a ton of adversity here in the playoffs. I think they kind of got away with it a little bit in that Game 6. Thankfully for Chris Kreider, thankfully for them that he showed up and was able to get the job done so they didn't have to play that Game 7. I think Florida is going to be too much for the Rangers, though. I'm going Panthers over Rangers in 5 games. Dallas and Florida meeting up for the Stanley Cup in the Stanley Cup final. Looking forward to seeing how these conference finals are going to go. The Stanley Cup playoffs never disappoints, hasn't disappointed us yet through 2 rounds. I don't think it's going to disappoint in the conference finals. Very excited to see action get underway here later this evening. I'll be covering the Stanley Cup playoffs the rest of the way, going through some more picks and predictions. Make sure to subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any of that good stuff. That is going to wrap up today's episode, though, of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all for tuning into the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to also go and subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. That way, you can get the latest episode as soon as it's available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and find me out on X at Jack Bushman2. Make sure to go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey as well. That way, you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. Apologies for not having a show come out earlier on in the week. Back to normal here the rest of the way. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.